Everyone. Hi there. I'm Jamal Rossi. We're going to just wait a minute or two for everyone else to join us, and then we'll kick things off here. But thanks for joining us. We'll be with you in a second. Well, I have 6 o'clock on my clock, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So again, first of all, welcome. We're so glad that you're with us tonight. I'm Jamal Rossi. I'm the Joan and Martin Messinger Dean here at the Eastman School of Music. It's wonderful to know that there's so many alumni who are joining us tonight and other friends. I would just say that Eastman has this remarkable legacy of performers and teachers and scholars and leaders, and they have done amazing things in their careers. Sometimes it's on the concert stage and sometimes it's off the concert stage, but still very related to music. In the last few years, one of the things that we've been doing at Eastman is finding more and more opportunities to collaborate with other partners. A few years ago, we created a degree program in music leadership in conjunction with the Simon School of Business. And we collaborate all the time with other groups. We just collaborated with Garth Fagan Dance, and we've got a big centennial premiere coming up with the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra and the Eastman Philharmonia. So this idea of partnering and trying to find more than the sum of its parts in any project is something that we've really been enjoying and taking advantage of. One of the great partnerships we formed, and it really was, I would say, 30 years in the making, was a partnership with the University of Rochester Medical Center. We have this incredible medical center right here, and we've got a wonderful school of music. And we have had people who have been engaged in performing arts medicine for many, many years. So about, I'm going to say 5 to 7 years ago, we decided to form a committee of members from Eastman and the medical center to really explore what could we do together formally. And out of that arose the Eastman Performing Arts Medicine, EPAM. And it has just been such a thrill to see this program grow and thrive. Thanks so much to the directorship of Gaelen McCormick, who's on the screen and who I'll turn it over to in a minute. But Gaelen's vision, energy, fearlessness, there are so many reasons that she has enabled this program to thrive. And one reason is because she's got a great mentor in Todd Frazier, who has been so instrumental in both inspiring us and guiding us. So the chance to bring together Todd and Tracy and Missy and Gaelen to talk about the role of music and medicine and the experiences that they're having is just something that I am so excited about. And so I'm looking forward to what they have to say as much as you are. And I'm going to turn it over to Gaelen with my thanks to the panelists, both for being here tonight, but especially for the work that you're doing. And so Gaelen, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jamal. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. And I'm still so incredibly appreciative that you offered me this opportunity to create something new here at the University of Rochester. I will never forget that day you barely uttered, "We have this program. Would you like to be involved?" Yes, 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 please. And it's been such a joy to work with Todd Frazier. And Todd's actually the reason that we even began, I think, to get this really seriously onto paper, how it would happen. And Todd, I'm going to ask you in a minute to talk about your program, but what I'm really curious about tonight, we're going to have this more of a conversational style with our panelists. We have a few questions prepared, and I'm looking forward to what the audience wants to ask us. But I'd like to talk about what the field is, because it's not one thing, and how we each got there, because our paths to entering this field have been really quite dynamically different. So I have Missy in my upper left-hand corner, and if you don't mind, would you tell us a little bit about your background? I had the pleasure of going to school at the same time as you. Tell us about your career and tell us, like, was there a moment you knew you wanted to make a change or an incorporation, or could you just share your background, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me on this panel. And I'm just so excited that Eastman is doing this. I've always been a proud alumnus of Eastman, and just to hear about its growth and involvement over these past 30 years is really inspiring. So that's when I graduated in 1991. So yeah, I was a voice major. And I already came to Eastman as an experienced child performer. I'm from New York City. I'm coming to you from Queens right now, Queens, New York. So yeah, I still perform. It's more secondary now, but I'm involved in a variety of music, choral, some solo stuff still. I kind of do my own thing. I'm a vocalist in 2 klezmer bands. I have a jazz quintet I sing with. I'm studying jazz guitar. There it is. So I'm very versatile. Yeah, the thing is about being a singer, I mean, let's face it, it's kind of ageist. And if you don't get to a certain level, you have to think about maybe doing other things. I think that's a reality for many singers and maybe other musicians too. It's a tough field. So I'm very lucky in that I've never stopped singing, and I don't really intend to. But I did have to look at the reality of how else might I be able to support myself. And I'm just going to take a risk here and be very personal, because, in this day and age, we tend to say personal things, but I think maybe it will help somebody. I came to music therapy because I wanted to be in a helping profession. When I realized, what else can I do with my life that's meaningful? I struggled with addiction. I started struggling with it in my teens, actually all through Eastman, even though I did very, very well. And throughout my 20s. And I did get help. And in the manner in which I got help was a way to also, be of help to others struggling. So I really, as I developed in my recovery, I took on this role of helping a lot of other people. And I began to think, this is incredibly meaningful in my life. How might I do this professionally? And then I realized I didn't really want to do anything else professionally unless it involved music. And so I did some research, because Todd mentioned before we started, when we were just chatting, when we were students at Eastman, we didn't know what music therapy was. So I don't know, I don't even remember how I found out about it, but I started to look into it. I'm pretty new at music therapy. I went to NYU and I enrolled in 2014. I got my degree in 2017, so I'm still fairly new in the field. But that's basically, I'm sure I'll go into more detail with what I'm doing now with it, but I wanted to help people and I wanted to use music. And so that's how I got where I am today.
I think that's wonderful. And what you just said about how you wanted to help people, I feel like for a lot of us, that's a key ingredient there, that the switch from performing, which I feel is very one directional, I play for you. It's a very different, music therapy in particular, that was a very different dynamic between listener and musician. Tracy, can I ask you if you would share your story next about how you came to this field?
Sure. So my degrees from Eastman are both master's and doctorate in accompanying and chamber music. So my whole career has been in academia, but as a performing artist, and playing with, anybody and everybody, essentially, voice, instrumentalists, everything. And at some point during my time at Virginia Tech, and I was there from 2004 to 2014, I had an idea kind of planted in my head by just knowing of an administrator at Virginia Tech who loved music, was not a professional musician herself, but she was suffering from cancer. And I remember thinking at the time, I didn't know her very well, but I remember thinking, I wonder if it would help her, if I could essentially go play for her near the end, like while she's in hospice care. And I didn't quite have the nerve to do it at the time. I didn't know her that well. But it really got me thinking about how I could use my skills as a musician to help other people who are suffering, from serious health issues. And I spoke to a friend of mine who is a music therapist. I happen to know quite a bit about music therapy because my undergrad is from Western Michigan University, which has one of the best music therapy programs in the country. And one of my fellow students is now in charge of that program. And I called him and talked to him and said, am I crazy for wanting to do this as a performing artist when I don't know anything about music therapy? And he said no. And so that kind of started me down a path of looking into the arts and health field from the perspective of an artist in residence. And I was amazed at what already existed, but also at the potential that existed for the future. So that's kind of what started me down a path of teaching, practice, and research in the field. So,
And would you remind everyone what your instrument is?
I'm a pianist.
Yes, which is funny. It's funny in a way.
The least portable instrument for performing
Exactly.
in a healthcare setting.
I was thinking, like, I know an electric guitar is heavy, but at least it's portable.
Exactly.
Todd, I have you next. I'm so excited to hear your story because as a composer, I'm particularly intrigued how you saw this opening, what that was for you. Would you share your story?
Well, that's quite a question, Gaelen. When I went up to Eastman to study music composition, I remember my dad told me that, he was happy that I was going to college, and he encouraged me to get a BMA and then maybe even an MMA or possibly even a DMA. But he just was very curious how either of those three might equal a JOB as an acronym. And so it was something I thought about. I think all of us think about, we usually enter into the music school because that's what we love to do. And I don't know about others, we sort of figure out, maybe we'll figure the other stuff out later, but we want to learn as much as we can and be in that environment. And that's what we dream to do. I suppose I had a little head start because as a composer, right from the beginning, you really kind of know you don't really have much of a future in making a full-time career. There's no real set path to just step in and become a full-time composer, except in the university. That's a good way to do it. And a lot of my colleagues ended up doing what I did. We just stay in school as long as possible to sort of put off that decision. And ultimately, you either get hired to continue an elaborate TA-ship or teaching at the university, or you do something else. And that something else was a big question mark. And I was always curious as to, well, why is that? Why does there seem to be such a narrow definition of professional success for artists in general when you have all of these people who are so passionate about what they do? And I hated to see some of my colleagues who were really gifted actually just leave the profession altogether because they didn't know what an alternative would be. I thought that's really sad. There should be a broader array of opportunities for where the arts can have value beyond just what would be sort of more traditionally those career paths. So I set out to continue to be passionate about writing music, which I still am, love the idea that maybe I could write music, but I wouldn't have to rely on people paying me to write music. So that's actually ideal for me. But what could I do that could service these other questions and other passions that I had about music in communities? And so I've set out to try to do things that would broaden opportunities, professional opportunities for artists, as well as look at ways we can expand the value placed on arts in new arenas, or in the business world, you might say emerging markets. Really, so I'm not a music therapist or an instrumental performer. I like to call myself an arts advocate, because right when I left graduate school, I think any of us that started to look a little bit at let's step back and look at what's going on in just the general state of K through 12 public education in the arts. And we were all probably pretty surprised of what we saw. So I've spent the first part of my career in doing all sorts of programs that I felt could try to safeguard the opportunity for young people to have the arts in their lives. And it was actually through some programming we did with special education that I saw the value of educators collaborating with artists, collaborating with the health professions, and what that could potentially mean for education. But that ultimately led me to think about how the arts can find their way into what I call environments of care. They're not just hospitals. They're different community settings where arts and health take place. The idea of the arts being used to achieve some wellness or health initiative, whether it be mental health or sharing health information. And I thought, this is a really wonderful opportunity to grow this segment of the field, to do both of those things, provide more opportunities for artists, and then also broaden exposure and value of the arts, into new arenas. So that's where I am now at Houston Methodist Hospital at the Texas Medical Center.
And can you remind us how long you've been there?
Well, so I've been here a little bit over 10 years. And before that, sort of the previous 15 or so years, I was working more closely in education, more K through 12 education. But when I started here, I was the only employee in what's called our Center for Performing Arts Medicine, which was basically something the hospital had set up as a healthcare support mechanism for performing artists within our community of Houston. And we're lucky in Houston, we do have full-time symphony, ballet, opera, theater, a lot of colleges that have strong programs, as well as a lot of the small mid-sized arts organizations. So there was really a recognition that performing artists, just like athletes, have unique health issues, and our hospital could be innovative in creating a service line that catered toward them. Now, I was brought on because the hospital felt that maybe we can do more than just be a healthcare home for artists. We can think about how the arts could be harnessed in support of the patient experience, employee engagement, and the results, clinical results of our hospital. And that came from just over the past 10, 15 years, in general, more awareness of words like music therapy, although still people not quite sure what that means, but they've heard about it. Books, Oliver Sacks books, books on music in the mind and music and neurology, things bubbling up and happening enough to say, maybe we should take a look at this. So fast forward to today, about 12 years, we did start a music therapy division. We have started what we call an arts integration division, and we have a research division, as well as we do support artist health. And we now have about 32 employees. And what I'm proud of is that almost all of those employees came from those undergraduate performance majors, like we all did, and sort of found their way, just like Missy said, found their own way, and I think what we're trying to do now with the Eastman program and programs that are more affiliated with universities is, if we can just make students aware these broader opportunities within this field. Not all of them are going to go into it, but there might be those few percentage that would find their calling a little bit early and get a little bit of a head start. So groups like this and programs like Eastman and Gaelen, you could help point those people in the right direction a little earlier.
Well, I absolutely, we're going to get to that in a moment, because I think that not everyone will go this direction, but the more people understand what this is, the more advocates we have. I talk a lot about music therapy. I'm not a music therapist. Like you, Missy, though, I was very interested in this at one point. I'll just share this one bit. I'll share a bit about my background. Let me make sure I share the right screen. Here we go. I think you are seeing my screen. Can I get a head shake from one of you? Yeah, thank you. This is my background. I am a performing artist. I was a performing artist, I should say. I'm like all of you. I'm a graduate of Eastman, and next year's my 30th anniversary. I can't wait. I have really made my career as an orchestral musician and a chamber musician, but also as a pedagogue, particularly to younger players and particularly to women, which wasn't something I set out to do, but sort of seems like the natural course, since there are so few women playing bass and teaching bass, that I wound up attracting a studio that's about 90% female here. And I'm super proud of my studio, male and female. But I had a medical problem come up where I lost my hearing. So I went deaf about 5 years ago. I went deaf on this side, and I'm in the process of going deaf on this side. So it makes performing really tricky. So that was really necessary for me to step out of the Rochester Philharmonic. Luckily, I was able to get a cochlear implant, which I'm sporting on this side. I don't know if you can see that. And I wear a hearing aid, and I talk about it a lot. Missy is similar to you. I talk about it because it might help somebody to know that, like, my life isn't over. In fact, this second chapter is pretty awesome. But my journey into the arts and health field actually started before Jamal and Donna Fox called me into the office to talk about this. As part of my own recuperation and rehab from losing my hearing, my therapist suggested that maybe I should go play for people in the hospital, which seemed really weird because I'm deaf. But the thing is, I can still play the bass really well. I just could never match pitch with any of you. So I started volunteering at the cancer center every week, and I really loved it. I was terrified for the first 2 or 3 times that I went. And after that, you couldn't keep me away. I would go in an ice storm. I would go no matter what. Childcare fell through. Good. My daughter's coming with me. She's going to play her little violin. And it really flipped that narrative of I play for you to like, you have to sit there and take it, to what do you need and how can I reach you? And suddenly it was like playing music again for the first time. I just completely fell in love with it. And I used to joke that I had to go deaf to really fall in love with playing music, but it's not true. I think all of us who have had long careers already on stage, there comes that moment where you start to feel like it's a job sometimes. And then you have to wonder, is that really why I got into this? I also read Oliver Sacks's books, and that's part of what started me pre-deafness, thinking about music therapy, and also got me invested in the music cognition group here at Eastman that's run by Dr. Betsy Marvin. She is amazing. She has a joint appointment with brain and cognitive science, and she teaches about music cognition at Eastman. And so I actually met with her a few times and said, maybe I should go in that direction. And anyway, there were all these little threads that I can see now are leading up to where I am here, but it gives me such joy to be able to share with the Eastman students and faculty a little training that Todd's helped us develop that helps us to think about what it is to be on stage and what it is to be in the hospital, where it's this two-way street. So I would really love to talk about, Tracy, I'd like to bounce back to you. Can we talk about what your program actually looks like?
So I'm the department chair for music at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And so right now, in terms of what's happening in higher education, it's pretty small on our front. I have a music and health class that I teach, which is an interdisciplinary class that's open to students from across the university. And it's sort of an introduction to the field of music and health, both arts and healthcare and arts and public health. So we try to kind of split the focus of the class so that people can learn about the field across all of those different disciplines. And we end up with students in the class that are in pre-med disciplines, medical humanities and biology. I've had history students in there, public health, as well as musicians. And then they each kind of find a path in the class that they really want to pursue in terms of their own little research project. And we've had guests from Houston Methodist Hospital, a couple of the music therapists, and we've explored the field from many, many different angles. So that's a starting point. And eventually, what I would hope to do is to get more students trained to be able to do this work, actually playing music in healthcare settings. We actually do have some of that already happening. A couple of our students actually live in senior residential communities and play regularly every week. As they get free room and board, and perform regularly for the residents at the different levels of care. We also pre-pandemic had our guitarists playing in the lobby of one of the big medical arts research centers here in San Antonio, and we're hoping that that will resume soon. And we also were performing at University Hospital some in the lobby. So I'm hoping to get all of that going again. In the meantime, we are collaborating with an organization, a nonprofit organization based here in San Antonio called Hearts Need Art. And we have had several of our students and faculty perform as a part of that organization, either bedside music or corridor concerts. And so we're looking at doing more of that. We're hoping to get a classical guitarist on their roster pretty soon. And so that's part of what we're doing. And so I see a lot of potential for pedagogy in this field in higher education. So I'm trying to pursue that as well as my own practice. And then many, many research opportunities. I counted, there are like 5 current research threads that I'm pursuing. So I actually made a mind map before this just because I was trying to figure out like how are all these threads connected. So I'm just going to like show this on the screen. That's a lot. There's a lot going on there. So anyway, you feel free to ask me about any of it, but that's a starting point. So.
And you also play in Hearts Need Art, right?
I do, yes. So I am a practitioner. I do bedside music, and I can describe that. I may have a picture of it that I can share in a moment, but we put a Yamaha digital keyboard on a hospital cart, the same kind that goes over your bed with your meal on it. So we roll it from room to room and ask people if they'd like to hear some music, and I plug it in and play for them. So I do bedside music. Pre-pandemic, we did corridor concerts. I am starting to do that again for healthcare workers, so traveling around to different nurses stations in the hospital, and infusion clinics as well. So playing for patients while they're receiving cancer treatments and things like that. I also participate in a program through Hearts Need Art called Gratitude Grams, where we send a weekly email to healthcare workers that includes a message of gratitude to healthcare workers, as well as a personal video, either a music performance or from one of our other artists in residence, a writing project or a little art project that they can do at home. And we have sent, I think, well over 5,000 of those now. We started that program in January of 2021, and it's been an amazing program to be a part of. So, yep. So those are the ways that I'm participating. And personally, I've also played for a family member as she was undergoing chemo treatments. I would do 2-hour Zoom concerts for her, like all the way through her chemo treatment, several times. And, and those are just really incredible opportunities to engage with people on a different level as a performing artist.
That is really special, I think, to play for someone who is actively in treatment. I mean, even I don't want to downgrade what it is to play music in the lobby of the hospital. One of my own musicians was in the hospital recently for something. This is pre-COVID though, and he said there was another pianist there that day, and he immediately felt like just de-escalated. And that for him, I think, was the first time to make that connection of how special that is, that it's live, it's not radio, it's not YouTube. Missy, can I bounce over to you? Would you talk about the scope of what's going on now and maybe what dreams you have coming down the road?
Oh, sure. Yeah, wow. This is such a great conversation. I'm so inspired. Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say something about being a music therapist. So that is like, so this arts and health is like the broad field, and it's already pretty much been said that there's these different things within that field. And music therapy is pretty specialized, where, you do have to get a college degree. So I had to get an additional degree. It could be undergrad. I did get a master's. I had to just take a couple of prerequisites in psychology, and because I didn't take those courses at Eastman. And then you go on to become board certified. And so technically, if you can only practice music therapy if you are a board certified music therapist. I understand there's a very gray area in there, but that's just a technicality. But that being said, like, we all have a place in this field. It can lead to some sort of like territorial things, but honestly, over time, I kind of think that's all kind of petty, and we all have a place. But it is a distinction that I think needs to be made. If you actually want to become a music therapist, you need to go back to school, you need to get board certified, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that being said, I use music very differently. When I was exploring getting into this field, I did some of the bedside performances and going into hospitals, et cetera, because I figured, and nursing homes. I spent a while volunteering at a nursing home before I made the plunge to go back to school, because that's a huge commitment. Because if you don't like being in those environments, then it's not the right thing for you, even if you have that intention. So if you're interested in any way, that's a good way to get started. But anyway, I'm a music psychotherapist. So I use music well, right now I'm in private practice, so I work with adults and children with mostly dealing with adults, generally deal with depression, anxiety, some underlying addiction issues. So a variety of things. The children, I've worked with children with autism, also anxiety, ADHD. But the way I use music is I try to enable my clients to have a musical experience. So if they're musicians, some of them are, that's pretty easy. They know what to do. But it's a relational thing. If they want to do that on their own, if they want to play a song or improvise a song, that's fine. But I try to join them in some way. But what I really try to emphasize, music therapists tend to say you don't need to have a musical background to get involved. So I invite my clients to try a variety of instruments out. Now, a lot of them are sort of easy entry, a lot of percussion instruments, but a piano is there, a guitar is there, and how they go about playing them doesn't really matter. It's more about an exploration. And then, because you might think, well, wouldn't that sound kind of like noise? Well, sure, it might. So I take in my musical skills and I join them, and I try to create a musical experience out of what they're playing. And this is very relational, which is a highlight of my work. I think psychotherapy is about relationship. And there's also something called musicking, which was coined by a musicologist guy who did all kinds of things named Christopher Small. And that makes his idea of using the term musicking was to highlight the process and the activity of music rather than making it a noun. So this is a process and an activity in which to get people to engage so that they have a relationship, and a lot of things come up. And of course, there's many things that happen. For example, I work with a child who has ADHD, and when we talk, she's bouncing all over the walls, and she needs to learn how to focus. So when we do drumming together, she is able to focus her energy. And we hope, music therapy, the purpose of music therapy is to use music to help facilitate non-musical goals. So the hope is that through the use of drumming or whatever musicking activity, that she can increase her focus outside of music. So that's just one example. But a lot of things relationally come up when you make music with other people. Make the anxiety, am I doing it right? you know, all kinds of things. So you could work out through doing more music or talking. And I've done additional psychotherapy training because in that setting, people like to talk. So it's good to have additional training in regards to that as well.
I want to lift up something you just said about the territoriality, if that's a word, because, and I'm going to pass to Todd in a second here, because there are so many different ways that music can be used in treatment and just in the healthcare environment. I think it's important to make distinctions, and I feel like that's where you're going with that. And I want to just say I appreciate that very much, because you do have a lot of training that the clinical hours you need alone to become a board certified music therapist is staggering, in my opinion. It was one thing that put me off, actually, when I was looking at doing that degree. I'm really excited to say that while Eastman does not have a music therapy program, we do have a class now called Intro to Music Therapy, and we partnered with Nazareth College, which has a degree in music therapy, both undergrad and grad. And Nazareth is about to launch something that I think all of us could appreciate if we wanted to go there, which is that you can come in with your performance degree and then do, I think it's a 4-semester track of getting all the things you need to become a music therapist, and then you'll go do your clinical practicum, which I think a lot of people will take advantage of if they don't have to go back and start all the way over again. But I just want to say I appreciate that. And I think, Todd, if you would talk about the different kinds of employees or the different types of music and musicians you have some really wonderful things going on at Houston Methodist.
Sure, thanks, Gaelen. And it's nice to hear from Missy and Tracy. I think that across the nation, we're probably in a sort of unique position because we are in an environment that has a strong arts and a very strong medicine community. We didn't start this way, but today we have about 20 music therapists working in our hospital system. And as Missy said, they're all board certified, and that's important because they are really working on the front lines in clinical ICU situations where I think one of the things that some of the attendees on this conference may be surprised to hear me say, one of the first things that they look for or try to ensure is patient safety. And then you say, well, what do you mean patient safety in music? Doesn't everyone just like music? Well, there are lots of situations once explained that you would agree that music is what we call counterindicated, or music can actually cause harm. And isn't that an interesting concept to think that music can cause harm? But when used in an environment where there's a heightened vulnerability of the recipient or the patient tied to a certain illness or a certain procedure taking place, well, we all know that certain music can increase your heart rate, and potentially increase a level of awareness or even alertness. Sometimes that may not be warranted. For certain patients, there will be certain requirements of beats per minute, certain stimulation levels staying below a certain point due to their procedure. And these are really important things to know going in to ensure that what we can do and how we can use music will have a positive impact and contribute to their overall clinical goal, which does take into account the whole person. So we have about the other 15 employees, we have artists in residence. Those tend to be the pianists that you might see in what we would call our community areas. So these would be non-clinical areas that are in general open to the public, but still not public like necessarily you were in a park or a traditional concert hall. Primarily people who work there, visitors who are coming and waiting, and patients who might be waiting are the primary recipients. And we sometimes talk about those as your unintended audiences, because many times they're happy to arrive at a music setting, but they didn't necessarily come to the hospital, to hear that performance. And so the guidelines that we shared with you, Gaelen, and you use for the artist's approach, the non-clinician approach, try to articulate how the purpose, the goal of what we hope you can achieve through music is a specific one, and it's in fact very different than the one you may have learned in your traditional conservatory. It's a hard thing to put it into one word, but if I'm forced to say, well, what is this goal in a community setting, a lobby, maybe waiting room setting, I would say overall it's to reduce a general level of anxiety that might be a common denominator that exists from the physician who's going to see a patient, the family member who's going to see the patient who's waiting for something. And so, that does kind of simplify it, but I think that's we found a pretty good common denominator. Now, if I could add one or two things, I'd say it's wonderful to create a welcoming space of solace, some place that one feels that they can sort of step into, and also receive some type of rejuvenation, even if they have 10 seconds or they can stay for, the whole 45-minute program. So we have pianists that play 7 days a week in our different facilities. We have 7 of them. We've actually shifted to calling them artists in residence because, as Missy said, they are also kind of a key collaborator with what's happening clinically. So many times you'll see our music therapists from the inpatient rehab bring their patient on an outing, which is really actually part of their therapy that they call community reintegration. They'll come to a concert, they'll come to hear the music, but they would have coordinated that beforehand and suggested that the pianist might play things within this genre, might play things with these certain beats per minute. And sometimes you'll find those therapists, even in that community setting, doing some motor skills, doing some things based on the rhythms of the music, and having a wonderful, more community experience still in the hospital. We also have more administrative employees that would be what you'd say like curators. We have a music specialist who curates all of our programs. We have a regular concert series here. We have groups from the community that come in and perform. And importantly, like Galen's center there, we send them our orientation guide. We sort of make sure they understand what we expect. And some of the groups don't like me very much because I'm a real stickler that I want to see their programming before they come in. But it's only because I've been surprised at how, even with the orientation guide, you're going to still find some artists that may not really fully understand the setting that you're coming into. And so I'm often, marking through a piece, but I'll have a very specific reason. And usually it's a good learning experience and they'll have that aha moment. So, oh yeah, so we don't need, a Baroque, classical, 20th century piece. No, that has nothing to do with what we're doing here. I mean, you're free to use the whole body of music, from folk music to pop your music, and your particular talents and passion to share here, but keeping in mind, it isn't so much your recital. This is an offering to this community, and we as musicians believe music can be a very supportive part of this journey. And isn't that an incredible opportunity, one that is so special to be thinking about how you could have an impact on someone's life, and what music are you going to choose? So it's actually been a wonderful conversation with a lot of very established professional artists. They just hadn't thought of programming in that way, and that's why actually our orientation guide. And when you go to the next person, I'll put the link on the chat so you can see it. It's actually called Orientation Guide to Programming for Environments of Care, because I think you could use this same guide if you're in a nursing home, a different community facility, anywhere that people are in a vulnerable health state, or healthcare employees that may be that we may be able to support through music. So, and then I'm a director of our center. We're unique in that we're an institutional service line of the hospital, and that's kind of a special thing. And it enables me to be at all those meetings that the director of orthopedics and the director of spiritual care, and really be in tune with what are the challenges of the hospital. And of course, now with COVID, these are some things that we're needing to respond to and react to very quickly. And one of the delightful things is all of our employees have maintained their employment, and we've found ways, a lot of virtual ways, to stay really, really relevant, and not even relevant, but I think, I'd like to say we've found many of our clinicians and clinics have felt us, I guess I'll say it, just essential to some of the work that's being done because of how the arts can uniquely bring that humanistic side to care. And I'm talking about both for patients that do well, but unfortunately every day, today included, there are patients that are passing still from COVID, and we're able to do a type of work we call legacy work, and of course, music is a wonderful tool to help process that transition and help bonding with families who can't be in the room, to help take a really tragic situation that's been happening in our hospitals with COVID, and try to make something out of it that can help people process. So I manage all of those folks, though we do have a manager of music there, a creative arts therapy. We just hired our first visual arts therapist. We also have a manager of our operations, which is more of how the arts are being integrated into the environment. So that's not necessarily the clinical music therapy. That's how we are using artists and arts in general to support patients and staff in a variety of ways. And then I'm responsible for all those folks.
You're the Papa Bear of all of this. I get that. It is truly impressive, the breadth of what is happening at Houston Methodist, and I'm really grateful that you've been mentoring us here in Rochester. I'd like to just share a little bit about what we are doing here, what we've been able to do, and what we've been doing through the pandemic to make some changes. And then I'll ask of each of you, like, what have you gotten out of the pandemic that's positive? Let's keep it positive tonight. What I'm showing you right now is a map. This is an overview map of the University of Rochester Medical Center. So it's Strong Memorial Hospital, but it's also Wilmot Cancer Institute and the Golisano Children's Hospital, way down at the end with the med school and the mental health and wellness area. And all these purple areas are places that pre-pandemic we were playing. So we were supporting 5 work days of music every day. And we had just started piloting playing on the units on the weekend up in ICU for the staff, which was really well received. It was very sad that only got about 4 or 5 weekends in before COVID came. Prior to COVID, we were playing right there. This is the cafeteria on one side, and you can see our trumpeter playing out. It's a beautiful garden break area. And so through one of the programs through the National Organization for Arts and Health, which Todd is a founding member of and past president of, we were able to go to different sort of emergency meetings that were held where we were all saying, what are you doing at your hospital? Are you able to keep employing your musicians? And this is where I got one of the ideas to say, well, why don't we use Zoom? We know as musicians, it is not ideal, but any port in a storm. And I was not able to get into the television system at the hospital at that point. So, okay, we'll go to Zoom. Employees can still hear this on their lunch break. And like a lot of larger institutions, a lot of us employees were now working from home. You can tell I am working from home tonight. So this is one of our chamber music professors. This is Eleanor Freer, and she's playing from her living room. And in between pieces, we just chat, and you can see there's a whole chat there from the listeners, primarily medical center listeners, but anyone is welcome to jump in and listen to that during their noontime. And Todd, you and your employees you're the ones that gave me that idea that, well, we have these musicians. I mean, staff need this as much as patients do. I love this photo. This is a beautiful garden area here down by mental health and wellness. We have some of our wonderful woodwind players. So this has now morphed through Project Music Heals Us. This has morphed into a much more intimate one-on-one experience now, where you can see our artist is home and he's playing for the patient by iPad. This is not music therapy, and we are very clear about that. This is just an environmental experience. It's really just a visit with the musician. Often they'll wind up chatting a lot in between. Not in the case of this particular person. I remember this was a day we needed to help them just de-escalate and get ready to go to sleep. But there's a lot of good things going on using the technology. Although I tell you, we all would love to get back into the hospital. This is some of our music therapy team. They were deemed essential right from the beginning. There was no furlough. And so they did move to online, and very quickly by July of 2020, they were back in the hospital. And I was really proud of them and the work they did and the creativity they drew on to keep that program going. You can see this purple bar. This is our website. And again, we were inspired by Houston Methodist. Just going to say it. If you click on that purple bar, it takes you to a page where we've brought together a lot of resources and really focused first on what's here in Rochester, assuming that we are serving primarily the Rochester community. Things that I'd love for people to be able to do when we can get out again, like Memorial Art Gallery. A lot of my musicians made videos so that we have these online video playlists now that are available, and certain departments are able to pretty easily call that up on the computers for patients. We started doing these digital care packages once a week that just go to staff at the hospital as a way of saying, we see you, we know you need time, we know you need some inspiration. Those were a lot of fun to put together. And then we took this idea. Now, Todd, you were talking about the chaplaincy, and that's been really important to our program. We're very lucky to have one chaplain who's also joint appointment at the Memorial Art Gallery. She's an art historian. She has her chaplaincy training, and she used to do this program bedside, where she would work with the art piece and the patient more as a way of having a therapeutic encounter with them. So I called her, and we turned some of these into slow art viewing. Some of these, like this one you see here, that was a ton of fun to work on. The satellites are spinning. We have the words of Sun Ra. His estate was willing to let us use this spoken word piece and music. It's just a wonderful break for the community. But these art at bedside pieces are much slower. They're very gentle, and they all draw on the Memorial Art Gallery art, the Eastman recordings, which are incredible and plentiful. And they're paired together, and they're only available in the hospital for the patients and for the staff to use. Let me stop my share here. I'm really excited about something that's coming up, though, which is that television system I was talking about. I really want everyone to be able to get their hands on this when they want to. And we discovered earlier in the pandemic, there was a problem with the television system in terms of how it could access things outside of normal TV. So we're getting very close to fixing it. I'm really excited at the idea of having lobby music that's live streamed to the TV, even if it might still be from home or from an Eastman venue. My goal is for it to be in the lobby and live streamed at the same time, and we're really very close to achieving that. Now, Tracy, I was hoping I could bounce back over to you for a moment, because I think there was something you were going to show us.
Yeah, I thought I would just show you, this is a pre-pandemic picture, but this is what it looks like for us to do bedside music in the hospital. And I say part of this was pre-pandemic because I'm not wearing a mask at the time, and there were 2 other musicians and residents in the room with me, but we play pretty regularly in the adult oncology unit at Methodist Hospital here in San Antonio. And it's just a very different, incredibly meaningful experience to play piano for somebody, 4 feet from the edge of their bed, and while they're undergoing really serious health challenges. So and so I'm doing that now again, and I think the pandemic certainly really showed that having those live interactions, those live personal interactions are so important. And so we're really glad to be back in the hospital, and Hearts Need Art is actually expanding to several different healthcare facilities doing this work in San Antonio. And I'm just going to throw their link in the chat in case anybody wants to see what they're doing. And to answer your question about like the coolest thing to come out of the pandemic, I would say it's the gratitude grams, which anybody can sign a healthcare worker up, or any healthcare worker can sign up to receive them. And like I said, they're weekly email messages personalized with a message of gratitude and an arts experience of some kind. And we actually just had somebody sign up to receive gratitude grams from Portugal. So that's a perfect example of, what the pandemic has essentially made possible.
Oh, that's wonderful. Missy, I'm going to bounce to you next. I want to remind everyone who's listening to us and participating tonight, we are happy to answer questions. So please, if you could put those in the chat, I'll read a note to my panel in a second. There's a lovely one here. Missy, what's something positive that came out of COVID?
Well, quite a lot, actually. Before I started my private practice, or actually while I was doing that, I was involved in my first job as a music therapist, which was working with preschoolers with autism. And this was at a school, and we shut down, and suddenly I had to do music therapy on Zoom. That was really hard, because then I felt like I was just performing for them, which of course has some value. But these were children that really needed to engage in music. So one of the benefits was I did get to work with some children that they were pretty low functioning. And I hate to use that term because hopefully for obvious reasons. I don't want to get into that too much, but they really needed one-on-one engagement. And the way they could relate was through making music. So we sent them egg shakers. We encouraged them to make instruments at home with everyday objects, and so one child would bring these things, or maybe bring some other thing that they had, and other objects were welcome, like puppets or whatever they wanted to show. And we would sing and make music together. So that was really great to know that these children weren't necessarily being left behind. Another thing that did come out of it in private practice, I did get started on Zoom. It wasn't my plan, but just when I set up shop, boom, we shut down. I have been helping. It's been an ongoing process. Just one example, a little girl who lost her grandfather from COVID very unexpectedly. And she was just having a lot of difficulty coping, and was just going, having suicidal thoughts, pretty hardcore for a young child. So she was thinking, well, I want to be with my grandfather. So she needed help. And what we did was we took a pre-existing song, something that she chose, a song that she really loved to listen to. And we took that song and we rewrote the lyrics. So it became about the experiences that she used to have with her grandfather and how she felt about her grandfather. Now, she didn't have much of a musical background, but basically we listened to the song together, we wrote the lyrics together, and I would play the song as we worked on it, and we would sing it together. And ultimately now she has a recording, and she can have that for the rest of her life if she wants to think about her grandfather. And meanwhile, she's not thinking about suicide, and she's really able to reconcile the fact that he's gone, but he's still here. And she's focusing more on the positive aspects of that experience than the negative. So we did grief processing, in short, through music. So yeah, that's just a couple of examples of how it hasn't been all that bad.
I'm glad to hear that. I think in the beginning, for a lot of us, it was such a steep learning curve. But I love I love how you thought about, getting something to them on the other side of the screen. So you're still bringing them into community together, because it's so vital to the music experience.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, going forward, just because, she has busy parents and siblings. It was their intention to come in person, but it doesn't work for them. So even though I'm back in person and meeting with people in person, we're going to continue our Zoom work, because other issues have come up that seem to be worthy of exploration through music, and it seems to be working. So her parents are like, no, it's fine, we're good. So I'm offering both, teletherapy and in person.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Todd, what do you think? What are some of the the gold nuggets that came out of this wild flip we all had to do?
Well, I guess I would have two responses. One, I guess, is just maybe more of a logistical coordination thing. I mean, we've all just gotten really good at technology, be it by force. And actually, we've been able to do some things that may have taken longer. I don't know if, maybe in a university system or in a hospital system, we're used to sort of a lot of red tape and sort of challenging to try to find new tools of communication, especially when you're talking about audio visual, web sharing, those kinds of things. So we've been able to sort of make light year jumps with, what we're now doing with our websites, how we're sharing websites. Every room here now has it's called a patient empowerment iPad. They just went on and did it. So we have all of our resources, all have versions with QR codes and versions that can go on the patient empowerment iPads, and our sort of in-house ability to live stream and how to promote that internally on our intranet and things like that. Those are things that we will keep doing and have been very successful, especially because we're a system of 8 hospitals. So they're not all located close to each other, but this is also allowed all eight hospitals to benefit from a lot of these tools in other ways that previously they just couldn't have benefited from. Now, overall, which I think maybe is more important for this discussion, I really do think COVID has drawn attention to how important collaboration is and communication is, to remember that the medicine is more of an art than a science, and that can be translated into a variety of ways you might say that. I think here we talk about the idea of a holistic approach to the whole person. And I think that really brought that to the fore, whether it's because the direction of medicine has been very specialized and can get siloed, not just this profession. This was a real wake-up call that, when you're looking at a patient who's completely isolated and you've sort of hit a point where your traditional medical training has kind of stopped, but your mind and your heart are telling you, but that's not enough. We still need more tools. We need to care for this person in ways that maybe we hadn't quite paid enough attention to. We're so glad that we were able to be here to be the referral at that point, because oftentimes they'd say, well, let's see what CPAM, that's the name of our center, CPAM, can bring to the table. And so that's when we started to do, well, there are things that we can do at end of life, and there are things that we can do for these major transitions. There are things that we can do when you have multi-generations of the same family in the hospital, and these extraordinarily stressful, really, types of scenarios that the medicine side is just kind of waiting and seeing, but the arts side can still be doing a lot to provide value. And I really feel that we have an opportunity as we come out of COVID to use the value of what we've done as artists in arts and health to further promote and further expose the value of having this as an essential tool within a health system to be drawn upon, for these kind of instances, not just these major epidemics, but there are lots of things that happen in communities that the arts are a wonderful response for. There are natural disasters. Unfortunately, there are things like school shootings that are very traumatic for generations. And so working with Red Cross, working with first responders, working with your hospitals, working with your juvenile centers, there's a lot of arenas in which the arts can provide an important value. And I hope it's going to expose that to the general public and to decision makers more, that it's an investment that, you know, pays off tenfold. We have seen signs of this now. The NIH and the NEA, if you go to their grant giving sites, both of them are now opening up significant funds to research related to arts and health, research related to clinical outcomes. You know, our fellow alumni, Renee Fleming, is leading the charge at the Kennedy Center with the sound health and those programs. And I remember she asked me, she said, well, she wants that to be her platform. And I said, well, that's just wonderful. And she wants to kick off with a big arts and health summit, you know, at the Kennedy Center. And I said, well, you should do what only you could do. You need to find a chairperson, but you need to find co-chairs. Your co-chairs should be the head of the NIH and the head of the NEA. And if you ask them, if you call them and ask them, they'll say yes. And I think you're the only one that can do that. And she did. And they said yes. So they're talking to each other now. I think there's a lot of good work being done, but it may just be the tip of the iceberg, which I think is really good for our field. And my hat's off to Jamal for embracing it at Eastman. Eastman's in a great position to have its proximity to its strong Memorial Hospital and its relationship with Nazareth, and of course its own forward thinking about the future and its students. It makes a lot of sense for this work to be pioneered there, and we're happy, you know, at Houston Methodist as a hospital to be affiliated. So it's kind of a long response, but there's a very practical side that comes out. We've all learned some things. We've gained some tools that I think some of those will help. But I really hope, you know, the overall field will benefit from it. And it's a shame maybe it's taken kind of a tragedy to expose that really more of a basic human side to care that we all have kind of intuitively know, but sometimes that's what it takes. And I think it's going to benefit the field. It has benefited ours. We've been hiring. Everyone wants music therapy for every transition from a bone marrow biopsy to a vent weaning. We're doing a lot more with the NICUs with children. So I think it's a good time to be in this field.
Very well put. I would say amen to everything you said. And I think the unexpected golden thing that came out of this last year was our ability to take the time to focus on research here. It was something I kept saying to our leadership team. I really want to do the things that have public, they can catch the public's imagination. That research is great, but research is slow, and people don't always understand what you're doing because you have to build all your results over time. So that's why we started with the lobby music. We started with healthcare for artists. So we have been able over the last year to really pull together a cross-disciplinary team here. And there are so many people interested in all these different intersections on a neuro level, on the caregivers for folks who are aging, folks who have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, you know, not just the patient, but the caregiver. So there's all kinds of ways that people are coming out of the woodwork, and we are starting to finally put grant proposals together. But I don't know that we would have had that time yet for another couple of years if we hadn't had to stop other functions that we were doing. So for me, that's the sort of unexpected silver lining there. Well, I want to respect our time. It is over 7. Our listeners are being awfully shy about their questions. So I know what's going to happen is as soon as we hang out tonight, our emails are all going to blow up with questions that you wish you had asked. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank each one of you. And we've got some lovely notes that we've been getting here through Q&A from some faculty and from some of the deans. And thank you all for sharing part of your evening with us. And I also want to really thank our leadership team with Dr. Mike Rotundo, Dr. Mark Taubman, Jamal Rossi, and Donna Brink-Fox for bringing this whole program together and bringing it to life. It has just been an incredible journey so far, and one that I'm looking forward to how it continues to unfold. So Tracy, thank you. Todd, Missy, thank you both so much. And I think with that, we'll say goodnight. This will be recorded and I will send it out to the participant list so you can share it with your friends. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Let's keep this going somehow.
Yes, yes.
Do it
Let's
again.
do it again.
Thank you.